From the News Channel 8 studios, let's talk live with your hosts, Natasha Barrett and Doug McElway.
And welcome back, everybody. Well, is there a way to identify someone who's not being truthful to you, and how do you confront them about their lying? Stephen Gaffney is a communication expert, and he's here to tell us how to confront a person who's lying to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you've got a list here of 9 questions to ask to see if you're not being told the truth. But I think what's interesting and what we talked about earlier is that usually your gut tells you.
Yeah, and you know what? We're all liars. We got to get that out in front. I mean, we all get afraid and we say white lies, or we say, "Well, I didn't lie, but I just didn't say everything."
Right.
You know,
There's different levels.
Yeah. Have you ever had somebody who doesn't share with you everything, and it has you make an entirely different decision? How do you feel towards that person?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, like you said, I think it's almost worse in some capacity not to say it. Not saying something is in some ways a worse form of lying.
Well, you know, with all the work that I do in the workplace and coaching in people's personal lives, the number one problem isn't what people say, it's actually what they're not saying. It's the lies of withholding. And the thing is that sometimes we train and encourage people to lie to us by getting defensive when they do tell us the truth.
Exactly. So if you ask someone, you know, how do I look at this black dress? You ask your boyfriend, they say, well, honey, you might need to, and you get upset, well then
they flip out.
Yeah, they flip out, and then you don't want to tell the truth.
But you know, I often have men ask me that question. They'll say, you know, if I tell my wife the truth, she's going to flip out.
Right.
If, you know, how do I look in that dress? And you know what?
You balance it out.
Exactly. I often say to them, you know, how often do you tell your wife that she looks great?
Exactly.
She looks beautiful.
You have to include the positive as well. So she won't be as defensive if you're honest with her.
Absolutely.
And what I think is interesting, too, as we were talking about, you know, what you don't say can really hurt you in the long run. And how many relationships do you know where all of a sudden the person drops a bombshell, they get divorced, and you're like, I had no idea because the person didn't say anything.
Yeah, you know, one way to detect a liar is if somebody's always saying things are great, or they show one emotion. The truth is we have up days, we have down days, and the question is, are we really being truthful? So if you've ever met somebody who always says great things, oh, how are things? Oh, great, 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 great.
Always positive and upbeat and happy, not realistic, huh?
Or how about if they always give you positive feedback? The truth is we all make mistakes. So sometimes in relationships, people say, we don't have any issues, we don't have any problems. And I often say, that is an issue, that is a problem. And at work, in the workplace, I often work with executives and I coach them, you know, how often do you hear difficult feedback, news you don't like to hear? And sometimes they say, well, people don't say that to me. And then I'll say, well, then they're not telling you the truth.
Absolutely. Let's go through some more questions here. Does the person discuss the present situation?
Yeah. Have you ever had somebody, you ask them a question, and they'll say, oh, about the president, like, did you get this report done? Well, I'm still kind of working on it. But, you know, next week, and they switch it to the future. I mean, you see this with politicians often. Yeah. They just don't answer the question. And people are sitting there at home saying, you know what, just answer the question.
Answer it directly. Just be straight up. And you know, let's talk about this, because I think that there is a fear sometimes people have of just being direct, worried that that person it's not what they're going to want to hear, so they kind of fudge the truth, otherwise known as a white lie.
Yeah, you know earlier,
like I'm only running 5 minutes behind when really you're running 15 minutes behind. Because why is that? Why are people afraid to tell the truth sometimes?
Well, because they're afraid if they really say, you know what, Pamela, as a matter of fact, I am going to be 15 minutes late and I'm talking to you on the phone, and if you get upset, then I'm like, oh, I don't want to go there. So what I'll think to myself is, well, I'll just deal with it later. And that I'll just deal with that later causes more problems, not less problems.
In the long run, and that is the key.
And you know what you all were talking about earlier about Jay and Conan.
Right.
You know, and NBC News, they put out, and I don't mean to be offensive here, but they said, you know, the two of them accomplished exactly what we wanted them to accomplish. Now we're switching. And everybody knew that that's not the truth.
Right.
If people just tell the truth, then we can accept it, at least more likely than when we're being lied to.
And then move on from it. Because
Absolutely.
it always backfires, right? Always backfires. Another good way, I think you mentioned here, to detect someone a liar is who they associate themselves with.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Big red flag if they're with people who aren't trustworthy, you know, don't have the qualities that you would want to find in someone, because that really is a reflection of who that person is.
Yeah, birds of a feather flock together. So if you meet somebody and they're always say, oh, I love honesty, and they show you know, the best traits, which is fine, about themselves, but then you meet their friends and you're thinking their friends are pretty lousy, that's probably who they really are inside, because you got to ask yourself the question, why would they want to hang around people who are different from them? most people like hanging around people who are like themselves.
Absolutely. And, you know, and that goes back to they're probably just telling you what you want to hear.
Absolutely.
It's easy to just say good things, positive things, but, you know, beneath the surface, you can really tell by who they hang out with. Let's talk about body language, too, because I think you can also, you know, I've been in situations talking to someone and they don't look you directly in the eye. You know, you're asking them maybe a hard question, and as a journalist, I'm always asking questions to politicians and so forth, and sometimes they don't want to look you in the eye. What does that mean?
Well, okay. That can be an indicator that somebody lies, but I think sometimes there's too much of an emphasis on body language, and we don't take into account that we're all different. Some people are nervous. Some people don't like looking at somebody in the eye. You know, I deal with a lot of defense contractors, and a lot of engineers, scientists, and technical folks, and sometimes they're just nervous. It doesn't mean that they're lying, and so sometimes we pay too much attention to body language. What I do think we should do is pay attention to some extent, and then check in, and realize that we're all different, and be more understanding of other folks.
All right, good deal. Another question on here. Do you feel like you can ask that person anything? Does the person encourage questions?
Absolutely. Have you ever met somebody who gets defensive, but they know they're getting defensive, but the reason why they're reacting is because they don't want to go there. Like, for example, my sister dated a guy who actually cheated on her, but before she realized and could nail him on it, she picked up little things, and so she started to ask him, and he flipped out on her. That was an indicator.
That's a red flag.
Yeah. It's like, if he really is comfortable with talking about it, or the person is, they should be okay with asking questions and answering questions, I should say.
And I think that goes back to what we said in the beginning, that usually your gut tells you. Your sister felt something in her gut.
She did. And I'm still mad about that guy.
Him.
If he's listening,
oh,
no.
I hope he was punished for that one. Okay, Stephen Gaffney, thank you so much for being here with us on the show. Good stuff today.